IVP Research Labs presents both sides of the mirror.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Bob Granito, President of IVP Research Labs. Thank you for attending our inaugural podcast, I think aptly titled Both Sides of the Mirror. So let me explain what we mean by both sides of the mirror. As you know, when research is conducted, there is a research side and there is typically a technology side. So we're going to talk about today how we combine both sides of that mirror to add value to our clients' research. That being said, I'd like to introduce my very special guest and friend of mine, Tom Rich from Thomas M. Rich Associates. I have worked with for many, many years.
Sure. I'm a qualitative researcher. I've been doing qualitative for probably 33, 34 years. I've actually been in business for myself for about 28 years. My background before this is in consumer packaged goods brand management, where I was a brand manager. And that's kind of where I started doing qualitative. But I've been really focusing my, professional energies pretty much exclusively on qualitative since 1996. I've served as president of the Qualitative Research Consultants Association, which is our professional association. I've worked in pretty much every industry you can name, and that's me.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Tom. For everyone watching, Tom and I have worked on many projects over the years, different research objectives, but most of the time, in the projects we have worked on, there's been obviously the research side of it, but it also required a technology side. So we're going to identify two case studies today where we will illustrate how the technology and the research was combined, again, to add value to the client's research objectives. So, Tom, I think we talked about the first case study was involved a disposable drinking cup study. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll get into the specifics.
Sure. This was a study where the client had developed and already introduced a line of disposable drinking cups that was using a new technology for the category. And they wanted to test the product concept, just the fundamental idea behind it, as well as the package design in a retail environment. So what we did is we conducted a series of one-on-one shop-along interviews. Those are interviews where you take a participant who's been pre-recruited and they walk around the store and you conduct conversation and gather other kinds of data. What we did here is we fitted each participant first with eye tracking glasses, which track where they are looking and what they're looking at. And also galvanic skin response gear, GSR we call it, which is just a very unobtrusive little thing that attaches to two of your fingers and your wrist. And what we did is we asked them to browse the disposable tableware aisle. Now, I'll make a confession here. My fellow researchers and I who were working on this study were deeply unimpressed by the product idea and by the package design. We were not fans at all. We didn't feel the idea would be at all compelling or have any real consumer utility, and we felt that the package design was just going to be boring and recessive. So we went into this with very little optimism. This attitude, by the way, was also shared by a number of people in senior management at the client, and it's possible that they were using this research to kill this initiative, or at least they were hoping. The research, however, showed that we were completely wrong. The biometric data showed that the package drew quite a bit more attention than we expected within a retail environment. When people walked down the aisle, they went right to it. And it helped us also understand within that package which specific elements, which graphical elements, which claims, which images were driving the attention and were creating engagement. Then after that, we did a qualitative interview with each respondent. We sat down, we talked to them for about 20 minutes. And this helped us gain a pretty detailed understanding about what it was about the product concept that was motivating and differentiating, and exactly how and when they thought that they would use this product. I would say that if not for this research, it's very possible, even likely, that senior management would have been able to kill this introduction, losing out on what has turned out to be a very successful product for the company. The fact that the methodology included both qualitative interviewing and biometric data enabled us to understand in the most complete way possible how the product was performing and why it performed so well. So this was a real success story.
For benefit of those watching at home, I just want to go through how the process unfolds, right? So typically whether it's Tom Rich from Tom Rich and Associates or another client, they usually reach out to us at IVP and say, hey, we're conducting some research and here's what we're trying to learn, right? Or here's the need we have. So once we identify that need, we can make a recommendation on technology, on what we think will work best to help us, again, achieve those research objectives. In this case, it was in-store research, right? So we knew right off the bat, hey, we want to see where the participants are looking as they walk through the store, right? And they go up and look at a shelf and so on. So we used eye tracking glasses to understand what that eye gaze behavior looked like. And then Tom said, well, you know what? Maybe we can capture a physiological response as well. And that's when we added GSR. And again, GSR, as Tom mentioned, stands for galvanic skin response. And what that measures is levels of arousal, right? So it's not uncommon. We're adding biometrics to other technologies like eye tracking or even EEG, which is brain activity and so on. But the bottom line is we are trying to satisfy the research objectives with technology to aid us in understanding, the user experience, right? So as Tom mentioned, there was real-time feedback, right? As someone was walking through the store, through eye tracking, we can actually see where they're looking. We can see specifically where their eye is looking. And the GSR we can look at as well to look for peaks and valleys of the arousal, right? Obviously, that's just a snapshot of what's happening at the moment. And then Tom can go in and look at that data and do the follow-up interview and probe based on what he's seeing from the data. So in this case, Tom, you could back me up if you want, and I think you already did, that we combined, the research methodology with the technology to, again, bring the research findings to another level, another understanding. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right. Well, I hope that was clear to everyone and how we did that. And it's not uncommon that we do these types of things all the time. This was just one particular in-store project. But Tom, I know we have another project we wanted to talk about as well. So I'm going to turn it back over to you and you can talk about the virtual project that we both worked on, where, again, research and technology were combined to add value to the research process.
Sure, this was a very different study from the previous one I just described. This was a study, it was focusing on a smartphone interface for an implanted medical device for heart failure patients. These were one-on-one interviews that we conducted via webcam with cardiologists and electrophysiologists. Electrophysiologists are MDs who take care of implanted electronic medical devices. We did these via an online qualitative research platform. What we did is we began with a description of the smartphone app. And then after that, we had a discussion to understand the participants' reaction to it. The concept was pre-written and they read it to themselves while I read it to them aloud. And we did it exactly the same way for everybody, which is good practice, particularly when you're gathering biometric data. During the description exposure, we gathered facial coding data. We did this with the knowledge and consent of the physicians. And facial coding is a technology that via the webcam tracks, I think, 25
areas of the respondent's face, yes.
Right. And it maps those against 7 different emotions.
Right. And I'll list those: fear, anger, disgust, joy, sadness, contempt, and surprise. And I sleep with those every night. So that's how come I can just reel them off real quick.
Nearly all of the MDs we talked to expressed unbridled enthusiasm for the concept we showed them. And the concept stated that this smartphone app was going to give patients a lot more access to the data coming from their implanted medical device. It was going to give them a much better understanding in real time of their condition and a greater voice in their care and the decisions being made regarding them. I don't think there was a single one of these physicians, there were 20 of them, that said, oh, I don't like that idea. They all said they loved the idea. But the facial coding data for nearly half of them totally ratted them out because it showed emotions like anger, fear, and disgust. I would say parenthetically that I think some of these physicians knew that they were not being fully honest with me in telling me that they loved this idea, but I suspect some of them had convinced themselves that they did like this idea, but the facial coding told us that, one layer below the surface, they felt somewhat differently. And what this did is this helped the client understand that they were going to need to take a very different approach than the one they had been planning in their promotional materials for this product. and in how they trained their sales force, the people who are going to be interacting with doctors and telling them about this new wrinkle in the medical device that they'd all been using for a number of years. And they realized that for a good number of the doctors, the benefits that they were going to describe were going to be somewhat off-putting, and they were going to need to think really hard about how they described them, the level of enthusiasm, and things like that. So it had a real measurable effect on the marketing and promotional strategies for this were developed.
That's great. Well, thank you very much, Tom. So maybe we could just illustrate some of the technologies we've been talking about. This is actually a project that we worked on for the Home Depot, and it was a simple project. And the task was go into the Home Depot and buy a garbage disposal, right? So the clients wanted to know what the participant slash future customer sees every step along the way, right? So you can see them walking through the Home Depot. Here they get to the garbage disposal aisle. We see what they see on the shelf, meaning the labeling, the actual device itself. Obviously, if they're making any verbal comments, we're hearing that as well. But it gives you a real great idea of not only how the store is laid out, but when they get to the area that they are most interested in, what they see and for how long, right? So again, very similar to the project that Tom had mentioned with the disposable drinking cup, just used for another product. So it was an online study. So I should mention that many times in a project, we can replicate what we do in person in online research, right? And that was the task that Tom came to me with. He said, hey, here's what we're trying to do. Is there a way to capture this virtually? So yes, we were able to share and mirror a screen of a person's computer and or their mobile device. And we were able to use facial coding to capture those facial expressions. So in that particular case study, we were capturing behavioral and emotional data at the same time. Again, pretty typical in what gets done today. It's very rare that we're just using one technology because clients want to get as much bang for their buck. So we usually outline a menu of options that are available, and they can pick and choose which ones we think might be the most useful. So that being said, Tom, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, but I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Well, I mean, listen, one of the things that you and I were talking about is just on a broader level, why it is that I find it helpful as a researcher to add things like biometrics and eye tracking into research. And the reason I like to do that is, look, like I said, I'm a qualitative guy. My profession is built primarily around things like conversation and maybe creative exercises and projective exercise and those kinds of things that moderators do. These are all ways that research participants tell us what they think or what they do, or more to the point, what they think and what they think they do. And that is useful because it tells us about how they see themselves. But it's often really hard with this type of approach to get a bead on reality, to understand what people really think and what they really do. And this is where things like eye tracking and biometrics are so valuable because they give us another data stream that informs our understanding of their beliefs and their actions. I've been doing qualitative for a long time, and all modesty aside, I'm good at it. I can get just about anybody to talk to me about pretty much anything, but I can't get anybody to tell me something that they don't even know they know. So these technologies are really valuable to me because they can access information that I otherwise can't. And then it's my job to kind of weave together a cohesive story for the client that talks about what we learned in the course of conversation and what we learned from the technology. And when you put it all together, what it really means and what they should do.
That's great, Tom. Thank you. And I think the biggest takeaway from today is, and I tell clients this all the time, is, my job is to collect the what and the when, meaning what happened and when did it happen, right? But we rely, and the critical part of the process is the researcher, right? So I want everyone to understand that it's a combination of both technology and research that really adds value. So we answer the what and the when, and Tom, you and colleagues such as yourself help us answer the why, right?
I'd say I couldn't have put it better.
All right. So I think we've talked about as much as we want to for this episode of Both Sides of the Mirror. So until next time, we'd just like to say have a good day, and we'll see you on the flip side.